The courtroom was silent as the judge read the verdict. Guilty. Officer Mark Collins clenched his fists, his heart pounding. 10 years in prison for a crime he didn't commit. His lawyer leaned in, whispering, "I'm sorry, Mark." But Mark wasn't thinking about himself. His mind was on Rex, his canine partner. The German Shepherd had been his shadow for 6 years, his only family. As the guards led him away, Mark made one last request. "Let me see Rex, just once." The warden hesitated, then nodded. Little did Mark know, Rex hadn't been the same since that night. He refused to eat, whining at the gate of the police kennel every night, waiting for a man who never came. The heavy iron doors of the prison clanged shut behind Mark as he was led down the cold, dimly lit hallway. His hands were cuffed, his uniform replaced with an orange jumpsuit, but his mind was miles away, back at the K9 unit where Rex would be waiting, confused and heartbroken. The warden had agreed to arrange a meeting, but Mark didn't know when or how. Days turned into weeks, and the isolation gnawed at him. Meanwhile, Rex's behavior grew more erratic. He snapped at the new handlers, ignored commands, and spent hours lying by the gate, ears perked at every sound, hoping to hear Mark's voice. The police department debated retiring him early, labeling him unstable. But one officer, Sarah Reynolds, who had worked alongside Mark, refused to give up on Rex. She had seen the bond between them, the way Rex would tense up before Mark even sensed danger, the way he'd nudge Mark's hand during tough nights. She knew Rex wasn't just a dog, he was a partner mourning his best friend. Then, the unexpected happened. A break in Mark's case surfaced. A security camera footage from a nearby store, overlooked in the initial investigation. It showed a shadowy figure planting evidence in Mark's locker the night before his arrest. Sarah, digging deeper, discovered that the real culprit was another officer, one who had a grudge against Mark for uncovering his corruption. But before she could take the evidence to the chief, her car was run off the road late one night. Bruised but alive, she hid the files, realizing the danger she was in. If the wrong people found out what she knew, both she and Rex could be silenced permanently. Back in prison, Mark was called into the visitation room. His heart raced. Was it finally happening? Was he going to see Rex? But instead of his dog, a stern-faced lawyer sat across from him. "We might have a way to reopen your case," the man said, sliding a file toward him. Mark's hands trembled as he flipped through the pages. Hope flickered, but so did fear. If the truth was coming out, someone powerful would do anything to stop it. And if Rex was still waiting for him, that made the dog a target too. The prison visitation room felt colder than usual as Mark stared at the legal documents in his hands, the words blurring as his mind raced. The lawyer's voice was low, urgent. "Someone doesn't want this evidence coming out. You were set up, but proving it means exposing people who won't go down without a fight." Mark's knuckles whitened around the papers. If they were willing to frame him, what would they do to Rex? The thought sent a jolt of fear through him. Across town, Rex paced in his kennel, restless. His instincts screamed that something was wrong. Mark's scent was fading, replaced by the sterile sting of disinfectant and the unfamiliar touch of temporary handlers. That night, when the kennel lights dimmed, Rex did something he'd never done before. He slipped his collar, nudged open the latch with his nose, and vanished into the shadows. Sarah, recovering from her accident, got the call at 3 a.m. "Rex is gone." Her blood ran cold. If the corrupt officers found him first, he'd be just another stray put down. She limped to her car, ignoring the pain in her ribs, and drove toward the last place Rex might go. the old training ground where Mark and Rex had spent countless hours. The moon cast long shadows over the empty field, and for a moment Sarah feared she was too late. Then a low whine cut through the silence. Rex stood at the edge of the woods, ears pinned back, eyes reflecting the dim light. He didn't approach. Instead, he turned and trotted deeper into the trees, stopping to glance back at her. He wants me to follow. What Sarah found in those woods would change everything. Beneath a rotted log, Rex pawed at a buried evidence bag, a flash drive wrapped in plastic. Mark's handwritten note was barely legible. Rex knows where the rest is. Her hands shook. Mark must have hidden proof before his arrest, trusting Rex to guard it. But time was running out. As she pocketed the drive, headlights sliced through the trees. A black SUV idled at the road's edge. Sarah shoved Rex into the underbrush just as a voice called out, "Officer Reynolds, you're out late." It was Deputy Chief Grayson, the man who'd signed off on Mark's arrest. His smile didn't reach his eyes. "You look hurt. Let me give you a ride." Back in his cell, Mark jerked awake from a nightmare, Rex bleeding out in the rain. The guard outside his door wasn't one he recognized. The man's grip tightened on his baton. "Collins, you've got a visitor. Now." But prisoners weren't moved at 4 a.m. Mark's pulse hammered. If they were willing to kill a cop like Sarah, what chance did an escaped dog have? The cold metal of the handcuffs bit into Mark's wrists as the unfamiliar guard marched him down the prison's back corridors, taking turns that didn't lead to any regular visitation area. The fluorescent lights flickered overhead, casting eerie shadows that made Mark's pulse quicken. He could feel the guard's grip tighten every time he slowed his pace, the unspoken threat hanging heavy in the air. Meanwhile, outside the prison walls, Sarah found herself trapped in a deadly game of cat and mouse with Deputy Chief Grayson. His offer for a ride had been anything but friendly, and now she sat in the passenger seat of his SUV, the flash drive burning a hole in her pocket, while Rex remained hidden in the dense undergrowth nearby, his low growls barely audible over the idling engine. Grayson's fingers drummed on the steering wheel as he casually mentioned how tragic it would be if another accident were to befall her, his words dripping with false concern. Sarah's mind raced. She needed to get this evidence to someone trustworthy, but the entire police department seemed compromised. As the SUV pulled onto a deserted service road, Sarah saw her chance. With a sudden movement, she yanked the emergency brake and threw open the door, rolling onto the pavement as the vehicle lurched violently. Pain shot through her injured ribs, but adrenaline kept her moving. Behind her, Grayson cursed and scrambled out of the car, his service weapon already drawn. Sarah didn't look back as she sprinted toward the tree line where Rex waited, the loyal dog emerging from hiding to run beside her. The forest swallowed them whole, the darkness providing scant cover as gunshots rang out, splintering bark from trees just inches from their heads. Rex led the way with uncanny precision, following some invisible trail only he could detect, taking them deeper into the woods where the terrain grew rougher, and the moonlight barely penetrated the thick canopy. Back in the prison, Mark found himself shoved into a small, windowless interrogation room that smelled of sweat and bleach. The guard who brought him in left without a word, locking the door behind him. The room's single light bulb swung slightly, casting moving shadows that played tricks on Mark's eyes. Just when he thought he might be left there indefinitely, the door creaked open to reveal not the warden or his lawyer, but the last person he expected to see, Officer Dan Harris, the man whose corruption Mark had uncovered before his arrest. Harris's smile was all teeth as he took a seat across from Mark, casually placing a file on the table between them. "You just couldn't leave well enough alone, could you, Collins?" he said, flipping open the folder to reveal crime scene photos of Sarah's wrecked car. Your little friend Reynolds has been sticking her nose where it doesn't belong. And now she's got your dog with her. Mark's blood ran cold at the implication. Harris leaned closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to sign this confession admitting you planted that evidence yourself, and maybe, just maybe, your dog lives through the night. The forest had grown eerily silent around Sarah and Rex as they paused to catch their breath. Sarah's hands shook as she pulled the flash drive from her pocket, the tiny piece of plastic suddenly feeling like the heaviest object in the world. She knew it contained the proof that could free Mark and expose the corruption in their department, but getting it to the right people seemed impossible now that Grayson was actively hunting them. Rex whined softly, pressing his wet nose against her hand as if sensing her despair. Then, without warning, his ears perked up and he turned to face east, his body tense with alertness. Sarah strained to hear what had caught the dog's attention. Then she heard it too. The distant wail of police sirens growing louder by the second. But were they coming to help or to finish what Grayson had started? The answer came in the form of a blinding spotlight cutting through the trees, accompanied by the staticky crackle of a police radio. "Subject sighted," a voice called out. "K9 unit is approaching from the north." Sarah's heart sank. If the entire department was in on this, there was nowhere left to run. But Rex had other ideas. With a determined bark, he grabbed Sarah's sleeve in his teeth and pulled her toward a narrow ravine she hadn't noticed before. The dog's instincts were telling him something. Maybe this was their only chance. As Sarah hesitated at the edge of the steep drop, she heard branches snapping behind them as their pursuers closed in. The spotlight found them again, illuminating the terror on her face and the determination in Rex's eyes. In that moment, she made her choice. Trusting the dog who had been Mark's partner through countless dangerous situations, she let Rex lead her down the treacherous slope, loose rocks tumbling beneath their feet as they half slid, half ran into the darkness below. Above them, angry shouts echoed through the night, followed by the unmistakable sound of a gun being cocked. "Forget taking them alive," Grayson's voice carried down to them. "That dog dies tonight no matter." "What?" The words sent a fresh wave of panic through Sarah, but Rex never faltered, his powerful body navigating the dangerous descent with surprising grace. At the bottom of the ravine, a small stream cut through the rocks, its rushing water loud enough to mask their movements. Rex plunged in without hesitation, the cold water swirling around his legs as he looked back at Sarah, waiting for her to follow. This was their only path forward. Through the water, into the unknown, with death close behind them. Somewhere ahead, if they could just survive the night, might be the answers that could clear Mark's name. But first, they had to make it to dawn. The icy water of the stream shocked Sarah's system as she waded in after Rex, the current pulling at her legs with surprising strength. Every movement sent fresh pain radiating from her injured ribs, but the sound of shouting and crashing footsteps behind them kept her moving forward. The German shepherd moved with purpose through the rushing water, his head held high to keep his nose above the surface as he led them downstream. The darkness was nearly absolute now, the moon blocked by the steep walls of the ravine, leaving only the faint glimmer of starlight reflecting off the water to guide them. Sarah's fingers brushed against the flash drive still clutched in her hand. This tiny piece of plastic had become their only hope, and she couldn't lose it now. The water grew deeper as they moved, rising to her waist, then her chest, the current threatening to sweep her off her feet. Rex circled back, pressing his strong body against hers to steady her, his warm fur a stark contrast to the freezing water. Somewhere above them, on the ridge, flashlight beams cut through the trees as their pursuers searched for a way down. A gunshot echoed off the stone walls, the bullet ricocheting with a high-pitched whine somewhere to their left. Sarah ducked instinctively, her heart hammering against her bruised ribs. Rex suddenly changed direction, veering sharply toward the eastern bank where the ravine wall showed a dark gap barely visible in the gloom. As they neared, Sarah realized it was the entrance to some sort of drainage tunnel, probably part of the old mining system that ran beneath these woods. The opening was half submerged, the black water swirling ominously at its mouth. Rex paused at the edge, his ears twitching as he sniffed the air, then turned to look at Sarah with an intensity that needed no translation. Going in there meant complete darkness, unknown dangers, and no guarantee of escape. But staying in the open meant certain death. Another gunshot decided the matter, this one closer, sending up a plume of water just feet from them. Without hesitation, Sarah followed Rex into the tunnel, the inky blackness swallowing them whole the moment they passed the threshold. The water inside was deeper, the current stronger, and the air carried the dank smell of wet stone and something faintly metallic. Sarah's hands scrabbled against the slick walls as the current pulled at her, her breath coming in short, panicked gasps. Then she felt Rex's teeth gently grip her sleeve again, guiding her forward through the impenetrable dark. The tunnel seemed to go on forever, the only sounds the rush of water and their labored breathing echoing off the narrow walls. Sarah's legs burned with exhaustion, her body numb from the cold, but she forced herself to keep moving, one hand always touching Rex's back to maintain contact. Just when she thought she couldn't take another step, she noticed the water level beginning to drop, and ahead impossibly, miraculously, a faint glow appeared in the distance. Rex surged forward, his claws scraping against stone as he pulled ahead. The light grew stronger, revealing itself to be moonlight filtering in through a rusted grate at the tunnel's end. Hope flared in Sarah's chest as they reached the barrier, but it quickly died when she saw how securely it was fastened. The heavy iron bars were set deep into the concrete, the gaps between them too narrow for even Rex to squeeze through. Sarah slumped against the wall, her strength finally giving out. They had come so far only to be trapped. Rex, however, wasn't ready to give up. He began sniffing along the edges of the grate, his wet nose working furiously. Then, with a sudden excited whine, he started digging at something near the base of the barrier. Sarah dragged herself over to see what had caught his attention and found that years of water erosion had loosened the concrete around one of the grate's anchor points. With a surge of renewed energy, she joined Rex in digging, her fingers scraping raw against the rough stone. After what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes, the grate shifted slightly with an ominous creak. Together they pushed and pulled until, with a final shuddering groan, one corner of the barrier bent outward just enough to create an opening. Rex slipped through effortlessly, then turned back to watch as Sarah squeezed her battered body through the narrow gap, the rusted metal tearing at her clothes and skin. They emerged into a moonlit clearing behind an abandoned industrial complex, the skeletal remains of old machinery casting long shadows across the overgrown lot. Sarah collapsed onto the damp grass, her chest heaving, her entire body trembling from exhaustion and cold. Rex immediately began circling her, licking her face and nudging her with his nose, his entire body vibrating with anxious energy. She knew what he wanted. They couldn't stop now. Somewhere in the city, Mark was still trapped in prison, his life hanging in the balance, and the evidence they carried could save him, if they could just get it to the right people. Sarah forced herself to sit up, wincing as her injuries protested the movement. The flash drive was still safe in her pocket, the plastic casing cracked but the contents presumably intact. As she took stock of their surroundings, trying to orient herself, Rex suddenly went rigid, his head snapping toward the tree line at the edge of the clearing. His lips pulled back in a silent snarl, the fur along his spine standing straight up. Sarah held her breath, straining to hear what had alerted him. Then she heard it too, the unmistakable crunch of footsteps on dry leaves, moving toward them with deliberate stealth. A figure emerged from the shadows, backlit by the moon so that Sarah couldn't make out their features. Her hand flew to the pistol holstered at her side. Empty. She'd lost her service weapon in the crash. The figure took another step forward, and Rex positioned himself between Sarah and the potential threat, a deep growl rumbling in his chest. Then a familiar voice cut through the tension. "Easy, boy. It's just me." The voice sent a shock through Sarah's system. Standing before them, looking as battered as she felt but very much alive, was Detective Liam Carter, Mark's former partner, the man who had disappeared the day after Mark's arrest, the man everyone assumed had either run or been killed for knowing too much. In the moonlight, Sarah could see the haunted look in his eyes, the fresh scars on his face, and the gun held steady in his hand. "We don't have much time," Carter said, his gaze darting to the trees behind them. "They're still coming, but I know how to end this, if you're ready to trust me." Rex's growl softened to a whine, his body language shifting uncertainly between suspicion and recognition. Sarah looked from the dog to Carter and back again, weighing their few terrible options. Somewhere in the distance, the wail of police sirens began to rise again, closer this time. The decision had to be made now. Carter extended his free hand toward Sarah, his expression unreadable in the dim light. "That flash drive you're carrying? It's not just evidence against Harris and Grayson," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "It's the key to something much bigger. And if we don't move now, we'll all end up dead before sunrise." The words hung in the air between them, heavy with unspoken implications. Sarah looked down at Rex, searching the dog's face for some sign. The German shepherd stared back at her with those knowing eyes, then slowly, deliberately, walked over to Carter and sat at his feet. It was all the answer she needed. With a final glance back at the tunnel they'd escaped through, where even now she could hear the distant shouts of their pursuers drawing nearer, Sarah took Carter's hand and let him pull her to her feet. "Where to now?" she asked, her voice raw with exhaustion. Carter's smile was grim as he turned toward the tree line. "Somewhere they'll never think to look for us," he said. "We're going to pay a visit to the police commissioner's summer house." The revelation hit Sarah like a physical blow. If the corruption went that high, Carter seemed to read her thoughts. "Oh, it goes higher," he said darkly. "But first, we need to get off this mountain alive." As they disappeared into the woods, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that they were walking into an even more dangerous trap than the one they'd just escaped. But with Rex leading the way and Carter at her side, it was the only play they had left. Somewhere in the city, a clock was ticking down the final hours of Mark's life, and every step they took now would determine whether he lived to see the dawn. The night was far from over, and the worst was yet to come. The dense forest swallowed them whole as Carter led the way through the undergrowth, his movements precise despite the darkness. Sarah struggled to keep up, her injuries screaming with every step, while Rex moved silently between them, his ears constantly twitching, his nose working overtime to detect threats. The police sirens had faded behind them, but Sarah knew better than to think they were safe. Carter suddenly stopped near a fallen oak, its massive trunk creating a natural barrier. He knelt, brushing away leaves to reveal a hidden compartment containing 2 pistols and a burner phone. "Been preparing for this for months," he muttered, handing Sarah a gun. The cold weight of the weapon in her palm felt foreign yet comforting. Rex sniffed at the cash, then let out a soft whine, his body tense. Carter's head snapped up. "They're closer than I thought," he whispered. Before Sarah could ask how he knew, the distant baying of hounds cut through the night, a sound that turned her blood to ice. They weren't just being hunted by cops anymore. The department had unleashed tracking dogs. Carter grabbed her arm, his grip bruising. "Change of plans, we split up." He shoved the burner phone into her hands. "Memorize this number. It's a reporter at the Tribune. She's been working on this story for years. Get to her if I don't make it." Sarah opened her mouth to protest, but Rex suddenly lunged between them, teeth bared at something in the trees. 3 figures materialized from the shadows. SWAT officers in full tactical gear, their rifles trained center mass. "Hands where we can see them," barked the lead officer. Sarah's mind raced. These weren't just any cops. They were the commissioner's personal strike team. Carter slowly raised his hands, but his eyes locked onto Sarah's with a silent message. "Run." In that split second, Rex made the choice for her. With a thunderous bark, the German Shepherd charged the officers, creating just enough distraction for Sarah to dive behind the oak as gunfire erupted. Bullets shredded bark where she'd been standing. She heard Carter shouting, then a sickening thud as someone went down. Rex's snarling mixed with pained yelps. Sarah's vision tunneled. She had to help them, but the flash drive in her pocket weighed heavier than the gun in her hand. The evidence was the only thing that could end this. She crawled backward through the underbrush, tears blurring her vision. A hand suddenly clamped over her mouth from behind. Sarah nearly screamed before recognizing Carter's voice in her ear. "Play dead?" He shoved a bloody Kevlar vest into her hands, one of the SWAT teams. "Put this on and don't move until I draw them away." Before she could argue, he was gone, crashing through the bushes like a wounded animal. Shouts followed him. "East perimeter. He's heading for the river." Sarah lay frozen, the vest sticky with someone else's blood, as footsteps pounded past her hiding spot. The forest fell eerily quiet except for the occasional whimper from where Rex had been fighting. Her heart shattered at the sound. Were they both sacrificing themselves for her? Minutes stretched into eternity before Sarah dared to move. The vest reeked of copper and gunpowder as she crept toward the last place she'd heard Rex. The scene she found would haunt her forever. 2 SWAT officers unconscious, a third moaning with a shredded pant leg, and Rex, lying motionless in a patch of moonlight, his side matted with dark blood. Sarah dropped to her knees, a sob catching in her throat. Then, a weak tail thump. Rex was alive, but barely. She tore a sleeve from the injured officer's uniform, using it to staunch the bleeding. "You stupid, brave dog," she whispered. Rex licked her hand weakly, his eyes still alert. They needed a vet, but every hospital and clinic would be watched. Then she remembered Mark's old friend ran an animal shelter on the outskirts of town. If they could make it there... Rex tried to stand but collapsed with a pained yelp. Sarah scooped him up, gritting her teeth against the agony in her ribs. The dog whimpered, but didn't struggle. With Carter gone and the hounds getting closer, she had one desperate option left. The burner phone's screen illuminated as she dialed the last person anyone would expect. Mark's estranged brother, a tow truck driver with a record and a grudge against the police. It rang 4 times before a groggy voice answered. "Who the hell?" "Jason, listen carefully," Sarah interrupted. "I'm with Rex. Mark's innocent. And if you ever want to see your brother alive again, you'll meet me at the old mill in 20 minutes. The line went dead for 3 heartbeats. Then, I'll bring the truck. Sarah pocketed the phone and adjusted her grip on Rex. The mill was 2 miles northeast, an eternity in their condition. As she staggered into the trees, a new sound made her freeze. Helicopters. Searchlights began sweeping the forest like malevolent spirits. The commissioner wasn't taking any chances. Sarah hugged Rex closer and started running toward the one hope they had left, praying Jason would show up, and that he wasn't walking them into another trap. The flash drive seemed to burn against her thigh with every step. Somewhere in the city, Mark was probably being transferred to a maximum security facility right now, his final appeals exhausted. And Carter. She couldn't think about Carter. Not yet. The night wasn't done breaking her heart. The searchlight beams sliced through the trees, like white-hot knives, illuminating patches of the forest in eerie, shifting pools of light as Sarah stumbled forward with Rex cradled in her arms. The German shepherd's breathing was shallow and wet, his blood soaking through the makeshift bandage and staining her already ruined shirt. Every step sent fresh waves of pain radiating from her ribs, but the sound of rotor blades growing louder overhead kept her moving. Branches clawed at her face and arms as she pushed through the undergrowth, her breath coming in ragged gasps. The old mill was still at least a mile away, and in their condition, it might as well have been on the other side of the country. A sudden burst of static-filled radio chatter from somewhere to her left made her freeze. The SWAT teams were coordinating their search, and from the sound of it, they'd found Carter. The lead officer's voice crackled through the trees. Suspect down and secured. Still missing the female officer and the K-9. Sarah's stomach twisted at the words. Carter had sacrificed himself to buy her time, and now she might fail anyway. Rex stirred weakly in her arms, his nose twitching as he caught a scent on the wind. Before Sarah could react, the dog let out a soft whine and struggled to lift his head, his ears pricking forward despite his injuries. Then she heard it too, the distant rumble of an engine approaching from the northeast. Jason. It had to be. Hope flared in her chest as she adjusted her grip on Rex and changed course, moving toward the sound. The tree line abruptly gave way to a narrow service road, barely more than a dirt path overgrown with weeds. And there, idling in the moonlight like a mirage, was Jason Collins' tow truck, its yellow paint peeling and one headlight flickering erratically. Sarah hesitated at the edge of the trees, her training screaming at her to assess the situation before revealing herself. Something felt off. Jason was early, and the way he sat perfectly still behind the wheel, staring straight ahead instead of scanning the tree line for her. Her fingers tightened around the pistol Carter had given her. A twig snapped behind her. Sarah spun, raising the gun just as a figure emerged from the shadows, but it wasn't a SWAT officer. Mark's brother stood there, his face pale under the moonlight, a shotgun dangling from one hand. "Took you long enough," Jason muttered, nodding toward the tow truck. "That's not me in the cab. They got to me first." Sarah's blood ran cold as the truck door finally swung open, revealing not Jason's usual flannel and jeans, but the crisp uniform of a deputy police chief. Grayson stepped out, his polished boots crunching on the gravel, a smug smile playing across his face. "Officer Reynolds," he called, spreading his hands in a mockery of welcome. "You look like hell." Sarah's finger hovered over the trigger, but Grayson just chuckled. "Go ahead, shoot me, then who's going to get your mutt the medical attention he needs?" He nodded to the truck's flatbed, where a veterinary technician in a white coat stood nervously beside a collapsible animal crate. The message was clear. Surrender Rex, or let him die. Rex growled low in his throat, his body trembling with the effort as Jason stepped closer to Sarah. "Listen," he whispered urgently, his eyes darting to Grayson. "I had no choice. They have my kid." The raw fear in his voice was unmistakable. Sarah's mind raced. This was the trap Carter had warned her about. The reason they'd needed to go to the commissioner directly. But Carter was captured, Rex was bleeding out, and she was out of options. Then she felt it, a subtle nudge against her leg. Rex, despite his injuries, had managed to slip something from Jason's pocket with his teeth. A key fob. Sarah kept her expression neutral as she glanced down just long enough to recognize the logo of the police commissioner's gated community. Rex had given her a way in. Grayson took another step forward, his hand resting on his sidearm. "Time's up, Reynolds. Give me the dog and the flash drive, and maybe I'll make your disappearance quick." The helicopter's searchlight swept dangerously close to their position, illuminating the triumphant gleam in Grayson's eyes. Sarah made a show of sagging in defeat, letting the pistol drop to her side. "Okay," she said hoarsely. Just help Rex." As Grayson reached for the dog, Sarah suddenly pivoted, shoving Jason toward the deputy chief and firing 2 shots into the tow truck's front tires. The loud pops echoed like thunder, and in the chaos that followed, she sprinted into the trees opposite the road, Rex clutched tightly to her chest. Grayson's enraged scream followed her. "Find them!" The forest blurred around Sarah as she ran, her lungs burning, Rex's blood warm against her skin. The key fob dug into her palm, their one chance. The commissioner's compound was 20 minutes away by car, but on foot through the woods with half the police force hunting them. Impossible. Unless... Sarah skidded to a stop near a lightning-struck oak, her breath coming in ragged gasps. Rex lifted his head weakly, nuzzling her chin as if to say, "Trust me." Then he did something extraordinary. He began barking in a precise pattern. 3 sharp yips, a pause, then 2 more. A signal. Seconds later, an answering whistle came from the darkness ahead. A figure stepped into a patch of moonlight, and Sarah's knees nearly gave out. It was the reporter Carter had mentioned, Lena Cho from the Tribune, and she wasn't alone. A half-dozen armed civilians fanned out around her, their faces set in grim determination. "Took you long enough," Lena said, reaching for Rex. "We have a vet standing by and a way into the commissioner's estate." As Sarah surrendered Rex to a waiting medic, she finally understood. This had been Carter's endgame all along. The flash drive wasn't just evidence, it was the trigger for a carefully orchestrated coup. And Rex, it seemed, had been part of the plan from the beginning. The realization hit her like a physical blow. Mark had trained Rex for more than just police work. The dog knew secrets even she hadn't been cleared for. Lena pressed a new pistol into Sarah's hand as the group moved out. "Ready to end this?" she asked. Sarah checked the magazine with trembling fingers and nodded. Somewhere in the city, Mark was probably being prepped for transfer to a black site. Grayson would be mobilizing every dirty cop in the department to hunt them down. And Carter... She pushed the thought away. One nightmare at a time. The real battle was just beginning. The estate's alarms wailed as Sarah and Rex slipped through the chaos, shadows among the flashing red lights. Rex led her not toward the main house, but to a hidden storm drain near the perimeter, the same one marked in the files as Omega Access. The metal grate lifted easily, revealing a narrow tunnel. Sarah hesitated, but Rex nudged her forward, his nose twitching with urgency. Inside, the tunnel smelled of damp concrete and something sharper, chemicals. The walls were lined with wires, all converging toward the heart of the estate. Rex moved with sudden certainty, his limp fading as if purpose overrode pain. Then Sarah saw it. a reinforced door with a biometric scanner. Rex pressed his harness against it. A green light blinked. The door hissed open, revealing a vault-like room, and inside, a wall of monitors showed real-time footage from across the city. One screen froze Sarah's blood. Mark, hooded and shackled, being shoved into a van by men in tactical gear. The timestamp read 4:47 a.m., 13 minutes until termination. Rex barked sharply at a control panel. Sarah rushed over, finding a single button labeled Omega Override. She slammed her palm down. Somewhere in the city, traffic lights flickered. Surveillance cameras glitched, and the van carrying Mark suddenly swerved, its electronic locks disengaging, its engine dying. The last thing Sarah saw before the monitors cut to static was Mark rolling free onto the pavement as his captors scrambled. Rex whined, pawing at a final file left open on the console. Sarah's stomach dropped as she read it. Contingency. Clean sweep. All assets terminated by sunrise. The commissioner wasn't just covering his tracks. He was burning everything down, including Grayson, Carter, and every cop who knew too much. And Rex was the only one who could stop it. Rex lunged for the control panel, teeth clamping down on a red emergency lever. Alarms shrieked as the entire estate's power grid surged. Lights blew out, electric locks disengaged, and the iron gates swung open. Sarah grabbed Rex's harness as they sprinted through the chaos, guards shouting in confusion. On the monitors, Mark was crawling toward cover, his hood now off. But one screen showed something worse. Carter, beaten but alive, locked in a cell as gas hissed from the vents. 5:02 a.m., 8 minutes until sunrise. Rex veered sharply toward the commissioner's private office. The door was steel, impossible to breach. But the dog didn't hesitate. He slammed his harness against a nearly invisible panel. A voice recognition prompt flashed, "Identify for Omega Protocol." Rex barked once. The system chimed. Voice print confirmed, K9 Rex, initiate final phase. The door slid open, revealing the commissioner aiming a gun straight at them. "You don't understand," he snarled. "That dog was never Collins' partner. He was our failsafe against rogue cops." Rex's growl deepened. The commissioner's hand shook. Somewhere outside, sirens wailed. The sun was rising. The commissioner's gun wavered as Rex took a step forward, his metal harness clicking ominously. Sarah froze. Had Rex been working against Mark this whole time? Then the dog did something unexpected. He tilted his head, letting his tongue loll out in that goofy way Mark always loved. A shadow moved behind the commissioner. Click. Carter's bloodied hand grabbed the commissioner's wrist, twisting until the gun clattered to the floor. "Funny thing about failsafes," he coughed. "They fail." Rex lunged, not to attack, but to snatch the commissioner's phone midair as he reached for it. The screen lit up with a single outgoing call. Clean sweep active, 0007. Sarah dove for the laptop on the desk. "Rex, harness here." The dog slammed his metal plates against the USB port. Override, accepted, flashed across every screen in the room just as dawn's first light hit the windows. Outside, the sirens weren't getting closer. They were already here. The commissioner's face went pale as the office doors burst open, not with his own men, but with state police and federal agents. Rex trotted to the lead agent, dropping the phone at his feet. The agent knelt, scratching behind Rex's ears. "Good boy," he murmured, then looked up at Sarah. "This dog's been sending us evidence drops for months. Dead drops in parks, USB sticks buried near fire hydrants, all marked with his paw print." Sarah's breath caught. That's why Rex kept escaping the kennel. That's why he'd led her here. The commissioner lunged for his gun, but Rex was faster. With a snarl, he pinned the man's wrist down just long enough for the cuffs to snap on. As the sun rose, Sarah finally understood. Rex hadn't been just a cop's partner or a failsafe. He'd been something purer, the one good soul who couldn't be bribed or broken. Moral lesson: true loyalty isn't blind obedience. It's doing what's right, even when it means biting the hand that feeds you.